that I wrote to provoke conversation, and then the ADL data gathering on everything that we would never have believed about anti-Semitism in the 21st century. And then watching yesterday's congressional hearings with Columbia University being a cadaver, which Elise Stefanik and other Republicans were able to use to prove weaponized ideas.
So your op-ed in the Minneapolis Post is entitled "Our Universities Cannot Forget Their Anti-Semitic Pasts." And it comes with a photo from my alma mater, the University of Virginia. So thanks for that. So walk us through our university's anti-Semitic pasts.
Look, I retired from the pulpit because of health, and I was approached by several people to help the then largest state university, St. Cloud State University, which was entangled in a federal class action lawsuit about anti-Semitism, Zamora et al. It was settled. As part of the settlement, the state and the state university system accepted the responsibility of creating a Jewish studies and community outreach program in a city with fewer than 20 Jews on a campus that had some Jewish faculty and less than 20 Jewish students in then a campus of 17,000, where 45% of all the teachers accredited in the state of Minnesota were taught a nursing school, business school. And over the 15 years I participated, I was able to create, as legacy of Zamora, a course called Anti-Semitism in America, which meant that students could take a course that met graduation requirements on human relations. It was the first course that was not an anti-racist course. That course has now been vacated. Mm-hmm. Jewish studies, religious studies, philosophy, an entire gone. It no longer exists. During the process of its financial woes, its low enrollment, and the decision to vacate, it has forgotten Zamora. It has forgotten the settlement that required the university to engage the community. University of Minnesota Research One, large Big Ten university, new president, is one of the schools that Department of Education is investigating about campus anti-Semitism. It's going through a period of its own self-evaluation in stripping the name off a building, a name that was given at a time when anti-Semitism was not one of the templates to measure, do we want this name to be honored? Ironically, the name is given and put on a building where Jewish studies is now housed. There is no course, no set standard curricular course of anti-Semitism at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. I used to teach on that campus courses about the Holocaust.
Yeah, one of the things you point out in your op-ed is that the state of Minnesota has mandated Holocaust education for their students, yes, but has no school that will teach teachers about the history of anti-Semitism.
And so I wrote this op-ed. The Star Tribune, the quote, large newspaper of record, said, "Thank you, we'll pass on it." So MinPost is an excellent large digital newspaper. Last week, I spoke with the head of the Jewish Community Relations Council about the op-ed and creating some of the conversations. And he pointed out what you just said. What are we going to do when the state legislature commits themselves after the study period to mandated required high school Holocaust education? And there is no course on anti-Semitism. I provoked St. Cloud State in some of my more delicate mannerisms, Jason. They've sustained the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education. And I said, you've sustained a Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education, but don't teach anti-Semitism. Is there a problem with that, do you think? So the interim dean said, okay, we'll let that course on anti-Semitism, which I last taught 2 years ago, we'll let it be taught one more time. It's an asynchronous digital bubble. So it will be taught next spring. At no point did anyone say this course represents a part of the history of our university. We created a program forced upon us by a settlement in a federal class action lawsuit. We hired someone. We were required by the federal court to have a whole day of sensitivity, learning, faculty and staff. Okay. And now money and low enrollment offer them the duplicitous screen of saying, don't need it anymore, as if somehow they're living in a world which is different than the world we're all living in. Where, according to the Anti-Defamation League, there is an increase of anti-Semitism, attacks, threats on synagogues, and the issues of universities could not have been calculated, all in 6 months. And yet, there is no need to teach this. That was part of the questioning back and forth yesterday, the House of Representatives.
So before we get to the House, you make a note in your op-ed that a writer proclaimed in 1946 that Minneapolis is the capital of anti-Semitism in the United States.
Yep.
Who said that and why?
It's was done in a way of referencing. I don't remember the author offhand. I can look it up in a minute. It was a famous line that evaluated the quality of life in the Twin Cities and looked at issues of real estate, quote, social redlining.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Look, there is nothing new about anti-Semitism. We've discussed this in our dialogue as rabbi and pastor. And yet, because it's the oldest hatred, one thinks somehow we have figured out its cause and what to do about it. I am here to argue today, this is a topic about which there is such systemic ignorance, and now I would argue such dangerous, divisive disinformation.
So then to pivot, you sent me one article by Mike Wagenheim, and then another from a CNN, David Goldman. Which one do you want to talk about first?
I don't care. Look, what I'm offering are moments. I used to call them cultural snapshots of the zeitgeist. Passover begins on Monday night, and I've been thinking a great deal about the fact that the Seder, the Passover meal, begins with a call to open the door and hold up a piece of matzah, the unleavened bread, and say, "This is the bread of affliction. Let all who are hungry come and eat." But you have to open the door and say it out loud. You go from the private to the public. After the meal is served, there's a concluding service, which begins with the messianic, the utopian, opening the door for Elijah. It's very difficult for Jews anywhere in the world to open the door this year, Jason.
Yeah.
And so no matter which article we use, the nature of the conversation is about how can we stop and engage each other in the horrific immediate nature of a hatred. It's not a social prejudice. It is a historic, cultural, religious hatred. And not move into the abyss of victimology, of cutting each other off from being able to engage dialogue. Do I think all Christians hate me? No, I don't. Do I think Christianity has a textual, scriptural, historic problem with me? Yes, I do. Do I think elements of the left now have conflated issues around a nation state and its current government with the destiny of a people? Yes, I do. So, how do we engage in having a relationship? I wrote an op-ed based on the unique role I had at a state university, create a Jewish studies program for a campus that has no Jews, connect the campus to a community that has no Jews. There are some important highlights. I created a public literary context of campus and community to study important classic Jewish texts.
Mm-hmm.
I brought a Holocaust oratorio memorial from the Twin Cities that was commissioned by a then Catholic priest and given to the Jewish community, and I brought it to a campus. State University and Catholic University jointly performed it, and then we went to Europe and performed it at a concentration camp. Took me 4 years, but I was able to push against the anti-racist faculty of color to get a course on anti-Semitism in America taught. I have no doubt about the issues of finances and enrollment, but at no point did anyone say, there's something about this course that represents an important positive legacy. Let's see if we can put it inside the statewide system.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the Jewish community at large and say, we need some fundraising to ensure that this can be taught even at the most asynchronous digital level that is an efficient way to hire anybody to teach anything. It is the indifference that I bring to our conversation. We are correctly confronted by the demands of DEI that the white majority privileged community learn about a past of oppression. We don't agree with the tautology that this sets up. I don't find myself as a white person, which is sociologically privileged, thereby ready to admit that reality makes me a racist.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, that's the times in which we're living. That does not include the issue of anti Semitism, because the majority of Jews are Ashkenazi, Eastern, Central, and Eastern European white privileged people.
Mm-hmm.
So, is this a topic that you think your children in school should learn, master, and understand as a matter of American civics?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in high school, I guess it was ninth grade, maybe. The school, I went to a magnet school, and the school closed for the day, and we all walked and took a field trip to go see Schindler's List in the movie theater. I have a vivid memory of that.
Diary of Anne Frank, Schindler's List, any number, but you have to learn something about the fabric that created the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
So, a state, and it's a state that has Mayo's Clinic in it, has one of the top Big Ten research universities anywhere in the world, a state where over 100,000 Jews live. And there's no place to teach that course.
Well, and it has other implications too, right? Because I'm learning things now about the America First movement in the 1930s and 40s that I didn't know until now. Even though I've read The Plot Against America and all these things. I didn't realize the America First movement was at its zenith well after Germany invaded Poland.
Oh, by the way, the Minneapolis airport was once named the Lindbergh Terminal.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Because I've read quotes from Lindbergh. I think I always assumed Lindbergh was more subtle in his anti-Semitism, but
Oh, no.
Yeah,
no.
It's astonishing how overt it was.
I don't want to line up another egregious silo of victims. I want to ask, how do we constitute a community in which relationship and dialogue become possible?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question, 2 lengthy articles in today's New York Times, both about the Columbia hearings and a review of everything that has happened on campus. I don't know what to say about the university today. If you had told me 6 months ago, when the Gaza conflict was initiated, that there would be a tenured professor at Columbia University who printed an essay on the electronic intifada heralding Hamas as freedom fighters, given the atrocities of October 7th. And what do you then do when a member of the House of Representatives says, should this person be teaching? Now, that is a complex, ambiguous question about which speech, freedom, academics, okay, can we have the conversation? Not as Joe McCarthy would ask someone. I don't know what Harvard, Columbia, St. Cloud State, What do we do now? Why are so many students enamored of a Palestinian cause without understanding the issues of the state of Israel and its history, the Dreyfus Affair? If you ask students today, what is the origin of Zionism? They immediately go to a long list of ideological idioms. And you say, do you know anything about the Dreyfus Affair? What?
So answer your attempt to answer your question. Why are students, people attracted to an ideological affinity in that direction?
In my opinion, it's because it requires no critical thought. They are attracted post George Floyd, post Me Too, whatever I can engage about those who are suffering that requires none of the difficult, arduous work of critical thinking, complexity, and ambiguity. I want to be certain about what I'm engaged in. And yet there is not a single cause today that offers that certainty. So how do we raise people to understand there are no more simple right answers? In fact, if you come upon something that is a right answer, please run away from it immediately. The Palestinian people as a community require dignity so their destiny can emerge. Absolutely. The protocols and policies of various Israeli governments have thwarted that destiny. Absolutely. There's a piece in this morning's Atlantic that talks about needing to understand how to read the past of the Israeli-Palestinian problem. There is a horrific course that was taught at Columbia by a one-semester instructor whose name was used in the hearings yesterday. And the nature of the course is a part of the, let me see if I can find it immediately, because you won't believe it if I read it to you. Yes, here it is. Don't laugh out loud, Jason. Decolonial Queerness and the Abolition in Swan, taught by Mohammed Abdu. This is Middle East Graduate Seminar. I think the title of the course already eliminates the possibility of much conversation. Okay, you don't want to be in a course like that? Don't sign up for it. I get it. On the other hand, is that guiding the university's vision? I don't have a quick answer to the nature of academic freedom and diversity. I don't think a course like that in its extreme language could be taught about people of color or women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the article you sent me got me to look up the ADL's report on the University of Virginia, which gets a grade of F for anti-Semitism on campus. Yeah, it's not. It's. I mean, I only live 90 minutes away from Charlottesville, and I didn't know about all of these anti-Semitic incidents on campus.
And let's say, and there have been Jewish institutions who question the ADL's severity of letter grades. Does this really help the conversation? And the ADL says, do you know a better way to create the conversation? So, what is it that we want to do? Look, USC has stepped into a hole it dug for itself. Let's give a woman who is Palestinian the right as valedictorian to speak at the graduation. Now people are looking at her social media feed and what she says. Oh, you shouldn't have given her the right to talk. Okay, we'll take away our invitation. And now, once again, they're blaming the Jews for limiting. I think everything about the nature of dialogue between faiths, between ideas, requires the common decency of, can I ask what you mean?
Yeah.
It means I have to stop and listen to your answer. What do you mean? If you say from the river to the sea, do you understand? You are erasing my identity. Oh, you didn't understand that? Then why are you saying it? Crowd contagion? And if we don't teach what anti-Semitism is, the origin of the Anti-Defamation League, what the pogroms in Eastern Europe were, what the Pale of Settlement was, all before the Holocaust. This is not my story alone. It's a story that ultimately we all share.
Mm-hmm.
I have said several times, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. Because if it's only a Jewish problem, it has no solution. You're an alum. The University of Virginia is important to you. So what do you do now?
That's a good question.
Should they have said, gee, we've gotten an F. We don't know how we got the F. We'd like to have people help us better understand what it means to be a F university. Maybe you should find out. Do they teach anti-Semitism at the University of Virginia? Is the course a course at such a curricular level that it meets a graduation requirement so students are enticed to take it? Maybe they ought to take a course on the campus where Charlottesville was used for that image.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it will take a group of alums who say, hey, do you want me to continue to put UVA on my CV? And the extremes in which we live don't want us to take the time and effort to ask these questions, which is why you have people like Elise Stefanik asking question after it. No time, yes or no, nope. But nothing in life can meet that standard. That's the problem.
So for folks who weren't following the congressional hearing yesterday, maybe they're tuned into the Trump trials or the impeachment trial in the Senate. Give us a summary of
Following Harvard, MIT, Penn State, Columbia University, the most famous university in New York, I don't know, a university that has 4,700 faculty members, is linked to Union and the Jewish Theological Seminary, law school, med school. They were brought by the House Committee investigating anti-Semitism. The president, a professor of law that heads up the task force on anti-Semitism, and 2 members of the board of directors to answer questions, which, seeing how badly their colleagues did, they could answer. Is screaming genocide to the Jews anti-Semitic? Yes. So we got some easy binary answers. But those Republicans who have now weaponized the topic, politically weaponized the topic, find professors who are tenured. Why is he still teaching? That's a reasonable question.
Mm-hmm.
But at a university at the threshold of Columbia, there are no yes or no answers. You cannot merely say what he wrote, what he said is intolerable. I'm going to fire him. Question was asked, could you name some Republican conservatives who are leading faculty members? What? 60 years ago, I was admitted to the University of California at Berkeley. When I was 17 years old, Mario Savio stood on the roof of a car in Sproul Hall Plaza, and the free speech movement was created. Okay, and yesterday I'm watching Elise Stefanik grill the president of Columbia. Why is this person still on the faculty? Well, because there are rules. There are laws. It's the complexity of the moment. Terrible anti-Semitism. Vicious, dangerous. The ADL findings are initiated by the question of safety. Do Jews feel safe on a campus? One of the first questions I asked you in our podcast were, how much does your church spend on security?
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
There are synagogues all over the world that have to ask that question about having a Seder meal inside the synagogue.
Do you really? I mean, is there an expectation or a fear of incidents on Passover?
Absolutely. The attack on October 7th was on the last day of the Festival of Tabernacles, Shmini Atzeret. Those who hate us use our calendar. Yom Kippur War, surprise attack on the, quote, holiest day of the Jewish calendar.
Did you see that? I saw a video, I think the Free Press shared it, of a group of activists that were meeting to prepare to disrupt the Democratic Convention. And when news of Iran's strike against Israel broke, they started chanting, "Hands off Iran."
Look, we live in a time best described by the Chinese curse. These are interesting times. If you had told me that 2024 would be defined by a hush money trial that the world would not have already swallowed up. I feel badly for the human being, Donald Trump, who must explain to his son, I can't come to your graduation because I'm on trial in New York for covering up an affair with a porn star. That is not a pleasant conversation, whether he has it or doesn't have it. And this man is running for the presidency of the United States, and there's an even shot he'll win. And we're having a conversation about, should we teach anti-Semitism? What?
Yeah.
But it will eventually just take individuals like you who are alums to say, excuse me, if we got an F in a subject, do you teach the subject?
And I mean, yeah, I mean, I took a class on post-Holocaust Jewish theology at UVA, but those courses weren't in any way required. And UVA's got a robust Jewish studies program, but again, it's not required of.
And not only is it not required, you don't have a course that might meet a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
That was the enticement of anti-Semitism in America. It met a graduation requirement. It filled in with all the anti-racist courses.
And I don't. I can't speak to UVA now, so I shouldn't.
But if we're having this problem, let's talk about, do we teach what the problem means? Where does this come from? That the first 23 Jews landed in New Amsterdam in 1654, running away from Recife, Brazil, and the Portuguese Inquisition. They were refugees from standard Christian anti-Semitism. Is this a moment worth understanding?
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm just thinking about my own children. I think the felt historical connection to the Holocaust, I think, was more present for my generation than it is for my kids.
Yes. Part of the problem that many of us already saw in the 90s was that the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, on the mall, it's on the mall.
It's near the mall.
Okay. It became another standard have to see while I'm in D.C. I have to fit it in. I've got a couple of hours. People have called me and said, could you help me get in? I didn't get a ticket. Excuse me? I think it is awkward for me as a Jew, as a rabbi, as an academic, to raise the question of, why are people not interested in understanding this form of hatred? I was shocked and angry that no one at the university, no matter how many times I called or wrote, wanted to save this course from the oblivion of financial ruin. And now we have the ADL and the U.S. House of Representatives all saying, gee, there's a big problem on campus. Edelheit is no great prophetic insight. I am a person who likes to gauge the world in which I'm living and figure out how do I keep the balance.
You ought to teach an online class.
I created one and would be more than happy to help resurrect it, if I can borrow that idiom, and make sure it doesn't have to be me. Ideally, I think a course on anti-Semitism in America is even better taught by someone who isn't Jewish. I'm not objective when I teach this. And I make it clear that there is pain and fear that informs my academic point of view.
Sure, sure.
What do we do as a country as we think about the nature of our racist history, of the history in which we have denied women, denied people with different abilities? Yes, we need to have a critical perspective about history, but then we get to a point and we see, look at this. We still don't take the time to understand this group.
Mm-hmm.
And who is this group? It's the group that brought us the single text that binds the three monotheistic scriptural faiths, Western culture. Look, they're still here. So I want to create a conversation, and I'm profoundly grateful every week that you offer me this platform. I want to start a conversation about the obvious need and now the collective will.
Yeah.
There will be some way of collecting the data at some point. Why do we need the data? What does it just mean that a Jew becomes so fearful of seeing a class in a listing of the curriculum? I can't take that class. I think that's a reasonable question.
Yeah.
And the marketplace of ideas can't be, shouldn't be a place where those who are different, marginalized, vulnerable are terrified that they can't walk across that marketplace.
So Passover is next week.
Begins Monday night, and it is a source of great joy. Tuesday night in our home, we will have a second Seder. Seder is the ordered meal, and we read a text called the Haggadah, coming from the Hebrew word lehagid, to tell the story. 87% of all Jews interviewed by Pew said they observe the Passover. It is the single most observed Jewish ritual because it's in the home, it's around food. It is the telling of a story, And yet the main character in the biblical story is not mentioned, Moses.
Mm-hmm.
It is a text that was created over 8 centuries, the Haggadah. It is the single most adapted liturgical text in all the Jewish community. And there are many, many new supplemental elements to it this year, following October 7th. At our Seder on Tuesday night, I will have an empty chair next to me, an empty place setting to remember the hostages who are not free.
And the script you sent me, this is one that you've put together?
Yes, it's something I compiled, cut and paste. It an opportunity to tell the story, but tell the story with the immediacy and painful complexity of this year. We are storytellers. Both of us are storytellers. You have just finished the extraordinary story of both suffering, death, and rebirth. I now tell the story, as does every Jew, of a past that began in oppression and fear and slavery, and then became freedom. And we are required, every person must tell this story as if you were there. But we have added new elements to our Passover. I have Kos Miriam, a cup of Miriam, in which we put water, not wine, but we put water, and I go around the table and ask people to give me a name of a woman who has been essential in your identity. I put an orange on the Passover plate, not a traditional symbol. Its origin linked to Susanna Heschel, Rabbi Heschel's daughter, who in the folkloric history was pushing for acceptance both of women and LGBT, and told by an Orthodox rabbi, they will be accepted and equal when there's an orange on the Passover plate. Okay, let's remember those who are different and not included. I will most certainly lead a Passover of defiance, of resilience, of resistance. It is a text that has to be given, but every text requires always new interpretations. And so some of the texts I will read from the past with great hesitancy. I don't know where God was on October 7th. I want to hope he was with all of the victims everywhere. I don't know the parents who are waiting for their children, their spouses, their brothers, their sisters, their children, who many now are dead.
Mm-hmm.
What will it be like when whatever negotiations are finalized and the best Israel gets back are body bags?
Yeah.
And yet, we are required to tell this story and bear witness. The bread of affliction. There isn't time for the bread to rise. Matzah is made in the totality of no more than 18 minutes. And it's flat and unattractive and not artisanal and okay. And for 7-8 days, this is what we eat to remember the origin. And that may be what is most painful this year. We were freed as slaves in order to go and get a revealed extraordinary moment from a divine source of ethics. Freedom for the purpose of Sinai's revelation.
Mm-hmm.
That generation didn't make it to the promised land because they were still slaves. They could not get beyond and hope for a destiny. Numbers 13:14. We are a generation that not yet 80 years ago survived and were given a strip of land partitioned by the international community. And there have been, since the outset of that, people who did not want us to have even that.
Oh.
How do you tell this story to the 3 grandchildren who will be at the table? I heard this week that a young woman, 12, who had seen her brother bar mitzvah, wanted to study and become bat mitzvah. She has stopped that study, being afraid of being a Jew. She's not at a university campus. You can't stop her from reading and listening.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to help our children learn, yes, we were this group, slaves, saved. Why weren't we saved now? He saved us then, why not now? We have to read the text differently. It's not an easy story anymore. Before the meal, in the last element of the service, we put bitter herbs, horseradish root, and some corrosive, a mixture of fruit, nuts, wine, or grape juice, and we put them together between 2 pieces of matzah, and it's called Hillel's sandwich. Hillel being a first century rabbi. And the idea is you taste the bitterness and sweetness simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is this moment. You cannot know who you are unless you taste the bitter and the sweet together. That is not an easy daily, sometimes hourly requirement.
Well, Joseph, I will be praying for you
Please.
this Passover, and next week, I think if you could walk us through the script you've put together, I think that would be illuminating for people.
And I thank you, Jason. You are a voice not only within your community, but ideally a representative for Jews who find this podcast, not to give up the hope, the striving for dialogue.
Yeah. Amen.
You'll be with me in spirit.
That'd be great.